The night in the ward, Cassidy. At the sterile white walls of the hospital room closed in on me, suffocating me with their antiseptic scent. I lay in the cold, unforgiving bed, my body immobilized by wires and tubes. The monotonous beeping of the heart monitor echoed in my ears, a constant reminder of my fragile state. I couldn't move, couldn't escape the relentless grip of the hospital's cold embrace. Night fell, and the hospital transformed into an eerie, unsettling place. The usual hustle and bustle of nurses and doctors had faded away, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The dim, flickering fluorescent lights cast eerie shadows on the walls, creating grotesque shapes that danced around the room. As the hours passed, a sense of unease settled over me, like a heavy fog rolling in from the darkest corners of my mind. I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched, as if unseen eyes were fixated on my every move. The room grew colder, the temperature dropping to a bone-chilling level that sent shivers down my spine. I summoned the strength to glance around the room, my eyes scanning the corners and crevices for any signs of what might be causing this unsettling feeling. But all I saw were the lifeless machines and the sterile, empty walls. There was nothing to explain the unease that gnawed at me. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement. A subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the shadows. I turned my head, heart pounding, and saw nothing but darkness. My breath quickened, and I dismissed it as a trick of the mind, a result of my weakened state. But the feeling persisted. It was as if the very air in the room had thickened, and I struggled to draw in each labored breath. Panic began to claw at the edges of my consciousness, threatening to consume me. I called for the nurse, my voice trembling. She entered the room, her footsteps echoing in the quiet corridor. I told her about the strange sensations, the unease, and the movement I thought I had seen. She offered a reassuring smile and attributed it to the medication and my condition, assuring me there was nothing to fear. Reluctantly, I accepted her explanation, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As she left the room, I watched her retreating figure until she disappeared from view, leaving me alone once more. Hours passed, and I tried to focus on anything other than the growing sense of dread that enveloped me. I stared at the ceiling, the cracks in the paint forming grotesque faces that seemed to leer down at me. I closed my eyes, attempting to drift into sleep and escape this unsettling reality. That's when I heard it, a soft, whispered voice, barely audible, like a faint breeze rustling through dry leaves. I strained my ears, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice was indistinct, unintelligible, like a distant murmur. It seemed to come from the dark corners of the room, from the very walls themselves. Terror gripped me as the voice grew louder, more insistent. It was as if it was trying to communicate, to convey some message that I couldn't decipher. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but my voice had abandoned me, leaving me trapped in a nightmare of soundless terror. The room seemed to come alive with shadows, twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes that surrounded my bed. I could feel their malevolent presence, an oppressive force that threatened to suffocate me. I tried to move, to break free from the wires and tubes that held me captive, but my body refused to obey. The whispered voice grew louder, its words now clearer, though they made no sense. It was as if it was speaking a language I had never heard before, a language of madness and despair. Tears welled up in my eyes as I struggled to understand, to make sense of the nightmare unfolding around me. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, its form hazy and indistinct. It moved closer, its eyes fixed on mine. I couldn't make out its features, but I could feel its presence, a palpable evil that filled the room. It reached out a shadowy hand towards me, and I recoiled in terror, unable to escape. In that moment of sheer horror, I awoke with a start, gasping for breath. I was back in my hospital bed, bathed in the harsh, unforgiving light of day. The room was as it should be, devoid of shadows and whispers. The nurse entered, her cheerful demeanor a stark contrast to the nightmare I had just endured. I tried to explain what had happened, the terror I had felt, the whispered voice, and the shadowy figure. But she dismissed it as a dream, a side effect of my medication. She assured me that I was safe, that there was nothing to fear. As the days passed, the memory of that nightmarish experience began to fade, replaced by the routine of hospital life. I was discharged, my health slowly improving, and I left the sterile, unsettling environment behind. But to this day, I can't shake the feeling that something truly sinister had taken hold of that hospital room, something that defied explanation and left me with a lingering sense of dread. And I wonder if, in the darkness of night, when the world is asleep, it still lingers, waiting to whisper its secrets to those unfortunate enough to find themselves in its grip. Night shift at the morgue, Wilson. I've been a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital for years now, but every night shift here sends chills down my spine. The dimly lit corridors, the eerie silence broken only by the occasional beep of monitors, and the haunting memories of patients who never made it out alive, those things linger with me. One night, as I made my rounds, I noticed a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned, and there it was, a wheelchair rolling down the hall all by itself. No one was there to push it, and the floor was eerily empty. My heart raced as I watched it come to a stop, its wheels squeaking in the quiet darkness. I continued down the hallway, trying to shake off the unsettling sight. As I entered room 203, a chill ran down my spine. The room was supposed to be empty, but there, in the corner, stood a figure in a tattered hospital gown. I couldn't make out their face, but I could feel their eyes on me. I backed away slowly, my pulse quickening. The figure didn't move, but its presence filled the room with an oppressive dread. I rushed out, leaving the door ajar, and went to the nurse's station. There, I confided in my colleague, Donna, about what I had seen. She raised an eyebrow and said,
"You've finally met room 203's resident ghost. Everyone who's worked here long enough has."
My heart pounded as Donna explained that room 203 was infamous for its ghostly inhabitant, a patient who had died under mysterious circumstances years ago. Nurses often reported seeing the figure or hearing faint cries in the dead of night. I couldn't believe I had finally encountered it. Later in the shift, I was called to room 315, known as the Whispering Room. Patients claimed to hear voices, even when no one was there. As I entered, I heard it too, a soft, unintelligible whispering that sent shivers down my spine. I checked the room thoroughly, but there was no one else inside. Just when I thought things couldn't get any stranger, I received a call from the morgue. A body was ready for transport to the funeral home. I donned my gloves and headed down to the basement. The morgue was a cold, sterile place, and the air was heavy with an unsettling stillness. As I approached the gurney, I noticed a strange lady standing near it. She had long, unkempt hair that hung over her face, obscuring her features. Her hospital gown was tattered, and she seemed to be swaying gently. I froze in my tracks, my heart pounding. Donna's words echoed in my mind. With a sense of foreboding, I did just that. I kept my eyes averted, refusing to acknowledge her presence. She began to mutter incoherent words, her voice a haunting whisper that sent shivers down my spine. I quickly completed my duties and left the morgue, never once looking back at the strange lady. The rest of the night was a blur of eerie occurrences, the sound of distant footsteps echoing down empty hallways, flickering lights, and strange shadows that seemed to move on their own. I couldn't wait for my shift to end. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, I handed over my duties to the day shift nurse and walked out of St. Mary's Hospital. The sun's warmth was a stark contrast to the chilling experiences of the night. I couldn't help but wonder if I would ever return to those haunted hallways, where the line between the living and the dead blurred in the darkness. And I couldn't shake the memory of the strange lady in the morgue, whose presence threatened to lead me into madness if acknowledged. If you found any enjoyment in the video, I implore you to click that like button and subscribe if you dare.